One question that comes up with ADHD in adolescents is how to differentiate hyperactivity, inattention that's kind of typical of adolescents, and manifestations of actual ADHD. So in terms of evaluation and diagnosis, what we're first going to focus on is really the source of information. Getting information from parents is crucial because this is very reliable information, but one needs to combine that source with other sources such as teachers in the school domain to really understand the functional impact of the symptoms in the daily life of the adolescent. Now, another point is that impulsivity actually, contrary to what we think, usually lowers during adolescence. It decreases actually. And so researchers such as Margaret Sibley and colleagues have noticed this, that there are sometimes fewer hyperactive symptoms in adolescents, but actually they suggest that one needs to focus on the functional impact of these symptoms. So if there are few symptoms, then one needs to really assess how these few symptoms actually pose an obstacle to development in different functional domains, such as school success, of course, but also peer relationships and the acquisition of autonomy as the adolescent grows up. Another question that comes up when evaluating ADHD during adolescence is the whole topic about the developmental manifestations of hyperactivity and inattention during childhood. And we may think, well, how much does what parents say or the adolescents say really reflect what happened during childhood? So some researchers actually asked this question and followed children, first observing the manifestations of ADHD during childhood, and then followed them up during adolescence, where they asked these questions and they could compare the answers with what they actually had observed as researchers during childhood. And they found that parental reports were the most correlated with their own observations during childhood. So that's really interesting when we evaluate ADHD, to have that source of information and to know that it's reliable. We also want to focus during evaluation on perhaps specific symptoms or maybe areas of functioning that are important during adolescence. Two areas in particular: motivation and sleep. Well, motivation, of course, has always been linked to ADHD, especially with research linking the reward system, which is atypical in ADHD. Individuals with ADHD need more reward to really experience rewards. And that has to do with the whole dopaminergic system, notably. But the motivation issue is not only an ADHD issue. Think here that we are dealing with adolescents, and reward in adolescence is social as well. So peer relationships, role functioning in peer groups, the ability to have success within the classroom, the ability to have satisfactory relationships. All of these factors are super important with regards to adolescent motivation. So it's not only a question about school performance, but also a question that relates to the more global issue of motivation and social relationships. Another symptom that we want to focus on, or at least an area of functioning, is the area of sleep. Sleep can be disturbed during adolescence because of shifting diaries, because also of cycles that can shift with hormonal pubertal development. And so the whole routines and rituals around sleep, the whole hygiene behaviors such as turning off the screen sufficiently in advance before going to bed, are all behaviors that are actually super important because sleep is more vulnerable with regards to ADHD. And it's especially important because sleep problems are also associated to the emergence of anxiety issues, the emergence of depression issues, and this really has to do with the fact that sleep provides some rest to the regulation capacities that we have, notably the attentional regulation capacities, but also mood, emotional regulation capacities. So as soon as you turn off that good sleep, or you have problems with this good sleep, then you are more likely to have problems within anxiety, mood, depression issues. Finally, one of the most popular questions, if you will, concerning adolescence and ADHD is, what are the chances that it persists until adulthood? Research suggests that while the diagnosis is not necessarily stable throughout development, the symptoms, and especially the inattention symptoms, are quite stable. What is going to predict the pursuit of this diagnosis into adulthood are really the number and intensity of associated problems during adolescence. So problems with sleep, problems with anxiety, problems with depression. Some research also suggests that a diagnosis of combined ADHD, which is both inattentive and hyperactive type, is associated to increased persistence into adulthood. So the field right now is quite interesting because a lot of longitudinal research is coming out, having followed children all through adolescence and adulthood, and can now answer more and more clearly the question about continuity of the diagnosis. And actually the diagnosis seems not necessarily that continuous, but the symptoms and their impact can as well be a bit more continuous. So to recapitulate what we've seen in this video, first of all, the idea here with adolescents and ADHD is to evaluate and diagnose on the basis of different sources of information. Parents have reliable information to give. As well, teachers that are responsible for the youth are important to interview so that we can combine this type of information. Then we are also interested in understanding the specific functional impact on school, on peer relationships, and on autonomy that these symptoms can have during adolescence. We are furthermore interested specifically in motivation as well as sleep problems, as they are associated to the continuity of difficulties during adolescence and sometimes also during adulthood. Finally, we have to realize that adolescence ADHD is the least researched topic in the whole of ADHD. So we've got a lot of research on adults, we've got a lot of research on children as well, but adolescence still needs more research, and especially research that is going to investigate how brain maturation is associated to the manifestations of the different types of difficulties that adolescents can experience when they have ADHD.